Hello, and let me welcome you to this demonstration and tutorial flight with ZIBO's Boeing 737-800 using the XFirstOfficer plugin by ParrotSim. Additionally, I use a self-made Lua script running on FlyWithLua by XFreezer to implement a briefing tool which improves the ability of the first officer a lot. You will find the download links for the XFirstOfficer plugin, the FlyWithLua plugin, and the script package with the procedures in the description below. For this very short flight from my hometown airport Graz to Vienna, I will use voice attack for voice commands, but you will see the command shown every time when I use one at the bottom of the video. Now let's jump into the cockpit and get the plane in the air. So we are now in the cold and dark cockpit, and we ask the first officer to power up. Power up.
Starting power up and pre-flight procedure.
First we'll check the gear lever and the flaps lever for the correct position, gear down and flap 0. And now he has turned on the batteries and external power and lights. Next he will perform the engine and APU fire tests and cargo fire tests. And afterwards we do the overhead panel flow. Beginning with the IRS and then the forward overhead panel from left to right, emergency lights, window heating, the electric hydraulic pumps, trim air, and the external lights. And the last thing is doing the tests, Mach airspeed test warning and the ground proximity warning system. We can now start to ask for some fuel.
Wind shear, wind shear, wind shear.
Go to the payload menu.
Terrain, terrain.
And we have block fuel for today's flight 10705.
Power up and pre-flight complete.
0705. Okay, and we call the fuel truck. Perfect. And then we enter the rest of the payload. Passengers on board for today's flight 130, so we put 10 in the business class and 30 okay, 60, 120, 130, perfect. And cargo we have 1,200 pounds, so we split it 50-50, 600 to the forward compartment and 600 to the rear compartment. Then we check center of gravity and total mass. We are within the limits, so that's okay. And then we can call the service to clean up the aircraft. Next we will do is the briefing. That is the included Lua script of this package. This briefing is designed to be used with different aircrafts, but for the moment I have only programmed it for the 737. Okay, first we enter the flight number. It's Airchild 7500. We have now all our call sign here down on the screen. We can hide this by uncheck this checkbox show. Then we select the aircraft. We use the Boeing 737 and the briefing tool has recognized that we are flying with ZIBO's Boeing 737-800. The parking position is stand 34. The destination is Vienna. And the cruising altitude will be, let's check the briefing, flight level 130, so 30,000 feet. And we use the parameter setting hectopascal in Europe. Weather information. Normally we would call the ATIS of the airport, but I don't use ATC for this flight at all. If you have the ATIS, we got here the information identifier. I will use for Graz now just Golf. Wind we have, okay, let's check online. We have 1,006 knots. So we will use runway 17 center for the south departure to avoid noise above the city of Graz. Temperature is 15 degrees Celsius and the dew point is -1. Parameter setting QNH is 1026 hectopascal. Okay. So this part is finished and we go to the departure briefing. Here in the top we have now the request phrase for the IFR clearance. They are all datas we have entered until now. So when we would flying online, we would now call delivery on Graz Tower with Airchild 7500 at stand 34 Boeing 737 with information Golf QNH 1026 request clearance to Vienna. And we would get now our clearance. We were cleared to Vienna via Roebuck, that's the initial waypoint. 3 Golf, departure runway 17 center. Initial altitude normally in Graz 5,000 feet. As we are not flying with ATC, I will enter the cruising altitude of 13,000 feet. And the squawk code we keep on standard here, 1200 set. The next we can do is to put in the radio stations. This is just for example. In Graz we have Graz Tower on frequency 118.2, and for the departure we have Graz radar on the frequency 119.3. Okay, check this here. These two frequencies are now in our station list, and we can ask the first officer to dial in these frequencies to COM1 standby. If we ask him now to put in the Graz Tower station, we see here with 118.2.
Graz Tower
Okay,
set standby
and
1.
we can swap it to active COM1, and we can let him put the next station in to COM1 standby. It's Graz radar.
Graz radar set standby 1.
This is quite useful on busy situations like departure or approach or taxiing, when the first officer will dial in the next station's frequency. Next we have to do is the departure configuration. First, we will use Pushback, but this option is not yet implemented for the first officer procedure, so we have to call the Pushback truck by ourselves. Then we have the zero fuel weight, the minimum takeoff fuel, that is 10205. Most of the other settings we get afterwards from the flight management computer. Just the initial heading we have to take over from the charts, and it's the runway track of 17 center. It's heading 166. Okay, all other data we get after configuration of the flight management computer. That we can do now. Go to FMC, position initialization. We are at Graz, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, Golf. Okay, and we put these coordinates into ZRS position. And we go to the route. We are starting in Graz, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, Golf, flying to Vienna, Lima, Oscar, Whiskey, Whiskey. Flight number is Airchild 7500. That was the wrong button. Again, Airchild 7500, and we put it to flight number. Yeah, perfect. The route. First and initial waypoint is Ropak. And we go direct to Nixie. That are our only waypoints. So activate and execute the flight plan. Next we have to enter the performance data, zero fuel weight. The FMC will collect this data from the electronic flight bag by clicking next to zero fuel weight. The fuel reserves we should have at Vienna 2.2. We are using the cost index 30, and cruising altitude will be flight level 130, so 13,000 feet. And we have to correct the transition altitude, it's 10,000 feet. And execute. N1 limits, we select takeoff 1 and climb 1. Takeoff. Takeoff is flaps 5. Then we need data for the center of gravity. We go to the fuel and weight balance, payload, center of gravity is 26.4. 26.4. And the flight management computer has calculated the takeoff trim is 4.75. And last we set the takeoff speeds calculated. Okay. FMC setup is complete now, and we ask the first officer to start the APU. Start auxiliary power unit.
Starting APU.
I don't know why, but the landing lights were on. So, first officer is now starting the APU, and after the APU is started he will switch on the APU generators. And meanwhile we start with boarding, so stop the service and start boarding. Okay, APU generators are on. We check APU. Okay, it's working. So we can disconnect the ground power unit. And after the boarding is completed, we'll remove the air stairs and close the doors. And now we ask the first officer to do the last pre-flight items before start items.
Before start items.
First officer will
Departure
now
briefing
set
not confirmed.
the barrier settings. Okay, the departure briefing is not confirmed. We have to check the departure briefing. Yeah. We have to request now the datas from the flight management computer. We have the trim settings, flap settings, the takeoff speeds, autopilot configuration. The initial climb speed is calculated by V2 plus 15 knots. We will not use anti-ice, and now the briefing is finished, so briefing confirmed. And
Departure
the first
briefing
officer can do his
confirmed.
job. Perfect. So you see, if we do not confirm the briefing on the end, the first officer will not continue the procedure until we have done this. So the boarding is complete. We remove the air stairs and close the door and cargo compartment and call the pushback truck. Request pushback.
Ground to cockpit, toes driving up.
So we have to set the parking brakes.
Before start items complete.
Perfect. So the MCB settings are done now. The auto brake is set to reject takeoff. The packs are on. APU bleed is on. Cruising and landing altitude is
Okay,
set.
all doors and hatches are closed. Ready to connect. Set parking brake.
Brake is set. Before start checklist.
Before start checklist. Battery on. APU on bus. Hydraulic pumps on. Gear down 3 green. IRS mode selectors NAV. Light test.
Checked.
Checked. Oxygen.
Oxygen. We have to test. Tested.
Tested. Yaw damper on. NAV transfer and display switches normal and auto. Fuel, 10,700 pounds on board. 4 pumps on.
4 pumps on. Okay. Checked.
Checked. Cabin utility and EFA on. Emergency lights armed. Fasten belts on. Window heat on. Air condition as required. Flight and landing altitude. Flight altitude set 13,000 feet, and landing altitude set 1,150 feet.
Checked.
Checked. Pressurization mode selector auto. Auto brakes RTO. Hydraulics checked. Speed brakes down detent. Parking brakes set. Stabilizer trim cutout switches normal. Radio aids.
Checked.
Set. Transponder mode. Standby. Squawk. 1200.
Checked.
Checked. Rudder and aileron trim 0. FMC CDU setup.
Okay, we have to look. The setup. departure, we have to put in 17 center for departure runway, and we depart via Roebuck 3 Golf. Execute. Let's check on the map. Yeah. So, complete.
Complete. Takeoff speeds, V1 131, V rotate 132, V2 141.
Checked.
Checked. MCP setting, speed 156 knots, initial heading 166, initial altitude 13,000 feet, altimeter 1026.
Checked.
Checked. Stabilizer trim set. Doors closed. Flight deck windows and door locked. Cabin passenger seated and cabin secured. XA cars.
I'm not using XA cars in the moment, but checked.
Tracking checked. Before start checklist complete. Start and push clearance.
Received.
Received.
So first officer will now turn off the packs
Beacon on.
for the engine start, and beacon on. And we
Start pressure checked.
start pressure checked. We have the start pressure. Okay. Start pushback.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go. Tow connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Brakes released.
Starting pushback, and you may start the engine.
Okay, we can start the engines now, starting with engine number 2.
Engine 2 timing. Start valve open N2 rising.
Okay, the first officer has now started the timing on his chronometer. When you have no fully accessed engine start after 1 minute, the first officer will call caution.
25% N2.
N2 idle. And after the starter cutout, he will stop the chrono and reset to 0.
Starter cut out.
And engine is stabilized. Starting engine number 1.
Engine 1 timing. Start valve open N2 rising. %, N2. Starter cut out.
Operation complete. Please set parking brake.
Brake set. Okay.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
Get engine starts. After start items.
After start items. Flaps set 5. After start items complete.
Good. Before taxi checklist.
Before taxi checklist. Generators on. APU off. Start switches continuous.
Tower is disconnected and bypass pin has
Rocky
been
on.
removed. Hand signal on the right.
Anti-ice
I'll see you next
off.
time and have a safe flight.
Anti-ice switch check off. Checked.
Checked. Air conditioning set. Flaps set takeoff. Trim set takeoff. Flight controls.
Flight controls. Radar. Checked.
Checked. Recall. Checked. Clear signal.
Clear signal we have. Received.
Received. Taxi clearance.
Taxi clearance we have received to holding point runway 17 center via taxiway Delta. Received.
Received. Before taxi checklist complete. Right side clear.
Left side clear. Then we turn on lateral navigation for the departure. And terrain. On the navigation display. So left side clear, right side clear. We turn right to taxiway Delta. So we are leaving the apron now, so we can turn on the strobe lights. Taxi items.
Taxi items. Cabin prepare for takeoff. Recall. Checked. Minimum takeoff fuel. Check 10,550 pounds on board.
Checked.
Checked. Taxi items complete standby for transponder.
Okay, the first officer has now compared the briefed minimum takeoff fuel with the actual fuel we have. So we can turn on the transponder as we are nearly at the holding point. Continue.
Transponder mode TARA call continue on line up.
So we are cleared for takeoff, runway 17 center. Check the approach sector. Approach sector is clear. And we are lining up. So continue.
Approaching 17 center. On runway 17 center.
So takeoff 60% N1, engine stabilized, takeoff, toga
Toga.
engaged, start timing.
V1, rotate. Positive.
Gear up.
Gear up.
$400. $1,000.
Engage vertical mode. So we start accelerating now. During the turn. Flaps 1.
Speed checked. Flaps 1.
Flaps up.
Flaps up.
So I raise the nose a little bit to stay below 220 knots. Okay, we're leaving the turn, so we can accelerate to 250 knots. Engaging the autopilot. Engage autopilot 1. So the autopilot has now taken over the command. And we are soon passing 10,000 feet. And then the first officer will fully switch off the landing lights.
Passing 10,000 feet. Passing transition altitude.
Okay, and after takeoff items. After takeoff items.
After takeoff items.
Gear lever to off. And
After
retracted
takeoff items
landing
complete.
lights off. Perfect. Let's check the flight situation on the navigation display. Okay. We are shortly before the top of climb. And as this is a very short flight to Vienna, we will start to plan our approach. First we have to enter the weather information. We can clear this information here by reset 80s. For Vienna I will put in the identifier Victor. Transition altitude is 10,000 feet. Wind is 110 07 knots. Temperature is 50 degrees Celsius, dew point -3. And the QNH is 1027. Okay, so we have wind 110. We will use runway 11 and we continue with the approach clearance. We are cleared Nixie 1 Whiskey. This is Nixie 1 Whiskey, ends at waypoint Ballard. So we need a transition to the runway 11, and this transition is Ballard 3 kilo, runway 11. Okay, and approach configuration, we have two briefings. The descent briefing, there we have only the airport elevation, it's in Vienna 600 feet, so briefing confirmed, and all the other stuff we'll do later. First we program now our FMC for arrival. We have to enter the rest of the route. Lima Oscar Whiskey Whiskey arrival using ILS runway 11, transition Ballard 3 kilo, and the arrival is Nixie 1 Whiskey. Perfect. Execute. And then we check the legs page and the navigation display to flight plan and step through. Okay, the route looks good.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are Passenger Escobar. Passenger Escobar. Just in regards to a special meal, would you please identify yourself to a flight attendant? Passenger Escobar, please.
So we are arriving waypoint Ballard in 3 minutes, and I like to shortcut the transition in the downwind leg, so we'll start the descent a little bit earlier. We do it now. We have to stay 8,000 feet above at waypoint Ballard, so just descending to minimum 8,000 feet. initiate descent, 1000 feet per minute, and we reduce the speed because we have maximum speed below flight level 100 of 250. So, okay, so the maximum speed is set, and we ask the co-pilot to do the descent items. Descent items.
Descent items.
We will turn on the fasten seatbelts and dial in
Checked.
the landing altitude of
Descent
600
briefing
feet.
confirmed. Descent items complete.
Okay. And we will set up the radio for the ILS approach. The ILS frequency is 110.3. 110.3 to active, and runway track is 112. It's already set. And we will set the nav radio 2 to Fisherman, Foxtrot Mike Delta. Frequency is 110.4. Okay, to active, and check here the navigation display. Fisherman. Okay. Perfect. Last thing we have to do is to set up the FMC for the approach reference page. We will use flaps 40. So we take flaps 40 and put it here in the setting. Okay, so complete. And now we'll do the approach briefing. Request data from the flight management computer. So flaps 40 we have now entered here. Reference landing speed 133 knots, and the final approach speed is 138. Auto brakes, we will use brake setting 2. The approach procedure is not programmed yet, will come next. The minimums.
Passing 10,000 feet.
Okay, we are passing also the transition. Yeah.
Passing transition level check altimeter.
We have to set QNH 1027. That we have to do manually in a moment, but that was too much. 1027.
Passing 10,000 feet.
Okay.
Passing transition level check
checked.
altimeter.
Okay, the minimums for the ILS approach. Because of the approach speed of 138 knots, the briefing tour calculated the category Charlie. So we have to check the approach charts for this runway, and we have a decision height of 200 feet with the radio altimeter. Go around procedure for the missed approach is runway track, so 112, and the altitude is climb to 5,000 feet in total. Okay, 5,000 feet. We're finished. Briefing confirmed.
1,000 to go.
So the first officer can put in all the parameters to the systems. Approach items.
Approach items. Approach briefing confirmed.
setting now the minimums. 200 feet radio.
Approach checklist.
The auto
Approach
brakes
reference page.
checked.
Checked. Landing altitude. Set 600 feet.
Checked.
Checked. Minimums. Decision height set 200 feet.
Checked.
Checked. Auto brake. Set 2.
Checked.
Checked. Navigation.
Navigation. So we have now here to correct our runway track. I don't know why that happens very often for 1 degree offset. Okay, it is now correct. So navigation. Checked.
Set. Approach checklist complete.
Perfect. We continue now the descent to 5,000 feet. And reduce the speed to 240 knots. Here we can see the airport. Flaps 1.
Speed checked. Flaps 1.
Okay, we will shortcut now the downwind leg. So turning heading 0 to 0. Select heading and we start turning and reduce speed 200 knots. So 14 nautical miles out of the DV signal. This should be perfect to catch the glide slope. Flaps 5.
Speed checked. Flaps 5.
And we turn in to capture the ILS. Activate localizer, and the glide slope is alive. So we select approach mode and localizer alive. Perfect. Gear down
Speed checked. Gear down.
and reduce speed.
Altimeter setting.
And runway in sight. 13 miles to go. Flaps 15.
Speed checked. Flaps 15.
So let's check the approach speed. Should be 138. Miles to go. Reducing speed. Flaps 25.
Speed checked. Flaps 25.
And we go down to 138 for the speed. Flaps full.
Speed checked. Flaps full.
And arming the speed brakes. Landing checklist.
Landing checklist. Gear down 3 green. Setting up MCP missed approach. Checked. Recall. Checked. Speed brakes armed. Flaps set. Landing checklist complete.
Landing checklist complete. So 7.5 miles to go.
2,500.
And radio altimeter is active now. All looks good. Let's take a look outside the fully configured airplane. Runway inside. Manual flying. Autopilot off.
Approaching minimums. 200 minimums.
Continue.
One hundred. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Reverser green. Auto brake disarmed.
Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the seatbelt sign is turned off. And keep the aisle clear of all carry-on items. Take a moment to check your seat back pocket for any personal items, like tablets and cell phones. When open the overhead compartment, be careful, as items may have moved in flight. And thank you for choosing American Airlines.
After landing items.
Cleaning up.
Left side clear, right side clear. We taxi now to gate Charlie 34 via Lima and taxi line 33. That is the pier west of the Vienna airport. As on the west side, the gate Charlie 34, taxi line 33. So we have to turn right. Check for Charlie 34. That is Charlie 35. Charlie 34. Okay. Okay, the gate lock has not recognized the aircraft, but I think we are on position. Parking brake set. Parking items.
Parking items.
APU generator is on, so we turn off the engines. Fuel cut off. And we connect the ground power. Set chocks.
Parking items complete.
Ground power connected. APU off. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this demonstration and tutorial flight, and have fun and always safe landings. Bye bye.